Margaret Thatcher, 1925-2013, remains one of the most influential and controversial political leaders of the 20th century. As the first woman to serve as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, 1979 to 1990, she reshaped not only British politics but also global economic and ideological currents during the late Cold War. Known as the Iron Lady, a nickname given by the Soviet press for her uncompromising stance toward communism, Thatcher embodied determination, conviction, and an unyielding belief in individualism, free markets, and national strength. Her legacy, though polarizing, continues to define the contours of political debate in Britain and beyond. Early life and political rise. Margaret Hilda Roberts was born on October 13, 1925 in Grantham, Lincolnshire, to Alfred and Beatrice Roberts. Her father was a grocer and a Methodist lay preacher who instilled in her the values of hard work, self-reliance, and moral rectitude, principles that later shaped her political philosophy. Educated at Somerville College, Oxford, Thatcher studied chemistry, and after a brief career as a research chemist, she trained as a barrister specializing in tax law. Her political career began in earnest when she joined the Conservative Party in the early 1950s. After two unsuccessful attempts to enter Parliament, she was elected Member of Parliament for Finchley in 1959. Thatcher's rise was steady. She served in various minor positions until she gained national attention as Secretary of State for Education and Science under Edward Heath's government, 1970 to 1974. Her controversial decision to cut funding for free school milk earned her the nickname Thatcher the Milk Snatcher, but it also established her as a decisive figure, unafraid of unpopular measures. When the Conservatives lost power in 1974, the party was deeply divided and searching for direction. Thatcher challenged Heath for leadership in 1975 and, to widespread surprise, won. Her victory marked a new era for the Conservative Party, which she redirected toward neoliberal economics and moral conservatism, rejecting the post-war consensus that had dominated British politics since 1945. Economic reform and the Thatcher Revolution. When Thatcher became Prime Minister in 1979, Britain faced severe economic troubles: inflation, unemployment, and widespread labor unrest. The country was often described as the sick man of Europe. Determined to reverse decades of economic stagnation, Thatcher implemented a radical program of free market reforms, monetarist policies, and deregulation. She aimed to curb inflation, reduce the power of trade unions, and revive entrepreneurship. Guided by the economic theories of Friedrich Hayek and Milton Friedman, her government cut taxes on higher incomes, privatized state-owned industries such as British Telecom, British Gas, and British Airways, and sold public housing to tenants. Thatcher believed that individuals, not the state, should be responsible for their own success. "There is no such thing as society," she famously declared, emphasizing personal responsibility and self-discipline. Her economic policies, collectively known as Thatcherism, transformed Britain's economy from one dominated by public ownership and collective bargaining to one driven by private enterprise and competition. By the mid-1980s, inflation had fallen and economic growth resumed. Yet these changes came at a social cost. Unemployment soared, particularly in industrial regions of northern England and Scotland, as traditional manufacturing industries collapsed. Critics accused her of deepening social inequality and eroding the welfare state. Nonetheless, her supporters hailed her as the savior of the British economy and the architect of national renewal. Confrontation and leadership style. Thatcher's leadership style was assertive, often divisive, and characterized by moral certainty. She saw compromise as weakness and believed in governing through conviction rather than consensus. Her combative nature was most visible in her battles with the trade unions, which she viewed as a threat to economic stability and democratic authority. The defining moment in this struggle came during the 1984 to 1985 miners' strike, led by Arthur Scargill and the National Union of Mine Workers. Thatcher refused to yield, deploying police forces to confront the strikers and using legislation to limit union power. The miners' defeat marked a turning point in British labor history. It broke the union's political influence and solidified Thatcher's dominance. To her critics, this episode symbolized her government's indifference to working-class communities. To her admirers, it represented her courage in restoring order and discipline to the nation. Hashtag the Falklands War and international prestige. Thatcher's global reputation soared after the 1982 Falklands War. When Argentina's military junta invaded the Falkland Islands, a British overseas territory in the South Atlantic, Thatcher swiftly dispatched a naval task force to reclaim them. The victory, though costly, was decisive. It restored national pride, boosted her popularity, and reinforced her image as a determined and patriotic leader who would not bow to aggression. Internationally, Thatcher formed a close ideological partnership with U.S. President Ronald Reagan. Both shared a belief in free markets, low taxation, and a hardline stance against the Soviet Union. Together, they championed the neoliberal turn in Western policy and played key roles in the final stages of the Cold War. While Reagan spoke of the evil empire, Thatcher's insistence on military strength and her support for NATO deterrence policies made her a central figure in the West's victory over Soviet communism. However, her foreign policy record was not without controversy. She opposed German reunification in 1990, fearing it would upset the European balance of power, and she maintained a skeptical attitude toward European integration. This skepticism eventually led to rifts within her own conservative party. The poll tax and political downfall. By the late 1980s, Thatcher's dominance began to wane. Although her third election victory in 1987 confirmed her popularity, her rigid leadership style and controversial policies created growing divisions. The most damaging was the introduction of the community charge, or poll tax, a flat-rate local tax that many perceived as unfair to the poor. The tax provoked widespread protests and riots across Britain in 1990. Simultaneously, divisions over European policy deepened within her government. Many conservatives, alarmed by her anti-European rhetoric and autocratic tone, began to turn against her. When her long-serving deputy Geoffrey Howe resigned and criticized her in Parliament, it triggered a leadership challenge. Facing mounting pressure, Thatcher resigned on November 28, 1990, ending 11 years in power, the longest continuous tenure of any British Prime Minister in the 20th century. Legacy and historical assessment. Margaret Thatcher left office as one of the most transformative figures in modern British history. She reshaped the economy, redefined the role of the state, and reasserted Britain's position in the world. Her policies laid the groundwork for the New Labour agenda of Tony Blair, who accepted many of her economic reforms while softening their social implications, a phenomenon sometimes described as Thatcherism with a human face. Supporters hail her as a visionary who rescued Britain from decline, restored confidence, and unleashed a new spirit of enterprise. They argue that she modernized the economy, reduced inflation, and liberated individuals from dependence on the state. Her critics, however, see her as a divisive leader who fostered inequality, weakened social cohesion, and prioritized market values over human welfare. Her influence extended far beyond Britain. Thatcher's commitment to deregulation, privatization, and fiscal discipline inspired similar reforms across the globe, from the United States to Latin America and Eastern Europe. Her ideological clarity and strong personality also made her a global symbol of conservative revival. In retirement, Thatcher wrote her memoirs, The Downing Street Years, 1993, and The Path to Power, 1995, and continued to exert moral authority within the Conservative Party. Although she withdrew from public life due to ill health in her later years, her legacy remained the subject of fierce debate until her death in 2013. Conclusion. Margaret Thatcher's life and career epitomized the paradox of transformative leadership. She revitalized a nation while dividing it, empowered individuals while dismantling communities, and redefined politics for generations to come. Her premiership marked a decisive break with Britain's post-war consensus and introduced a new political vocabulary centered on self-reliance, entrepreneurship, and global competitiveness. Whether admired or condemned, Thatcher's influence endures. The Iron Lady not only reshaped Britain's economic foundations, but also redefined what it meant to lead with conviction in an age of uncertainty. She remains a symbol of strength, willpower, and ideological determination, an indelible figure in the history of modern democracy.